Hey everybody, it's Eric Dorward with the Spartan Rocketry Club here, finishing up finally our build of the Estes Screamin Mimi, which is a very vintage kit. So anyway, I've finished it. Well, almost. I've done the finishing steps anyway. You can see I've painted it. I've actually taken some creative liberties compared to the packaging. The packaging doesn't want me to paint this section in here, the body tube red. I found it far easier if I wanted to paint the fins and these strakes to do it, just paint it all. And it's up to you. You can paint this however you want. Also, the body tube is supposed to be silver rather than white, but again, I preferred it white. You can do whatever you want. It's your kit. Now, I've already started to do some of the finishing too. Oh, I should mention one last thing. So, the fins. The fins take a good amount of work if you want them to be very smooth. You can probably see if you look carefully, this one in particular, no, this one in particular, there are some spots in this that are not crystal, perfectly smooth. Um, and I've tried my best to fill them in. You can see there's an imperfection right there. The problem is that balsa has a lot of grain to it. If you want to get the grain out, you need to fill it in. So I've used a combination of what is essentially a nice spackle, which I diluted a little bit with water and then brushed on. And I also have a liquid wood sealer that I paint on over top of that. And then I primed it with regular white primer spray paint, sanded in between each of those steps, and then put the final coat on. There is definitely a difference between doing that stuff and not doing that stuff. The amount of grain here it's not perfect. I'm not going to claim it to be, but it's a whole lot smoother than you would if you just painted it red. So if you want a good finish, you got to do those intervening steps. And probably I didn't do enough of the fill. I probably should have done another coat. But whatever, it doesn't need to be perfect. The smoother the fin, the less drag there is. And there is a noticeable difference between the really rough balsa and smoothing it out in any way, even priming it. So it is worth doing, but there are limits to how good it's going to be. Anyway, so that was a major step that I did off camera. Also, I painted it. Painting it is annoying. I needed to mask off these tubes and the body tube right here, which was kind of difficult getting my masking tape in here. Incidentally, I use particularly, it's called ultra high edge um, painter's tape. And it is hard to work with. It's kind of annoying, but you get good edges, good lines on it. So, worth doing. Anyway, one thing I have done is I put most of these whistles on. That would be what makes this the Screamin Mimi. So, this goes through the air and makes a noise, like so. So I've done most of those, but here's the last one. I'm going to do that on camera. It goes in like this. The instructions say to use plastic cement. I'm not going to bother with plastic cement because the inside of the tube it's a tube, it's cardboard, and we put these cardboard rings on. So I'm essentially gluing cardboard to cardboard. So I'm not going to bother with crazy plastic cement or crazy glue or anything like that. It is irritating to get the glue in here. So I'm going to try my best. The instructions say to put the glue in something like an eighth of an inch or so. So you don't want it right at the edge. You could, but it'll just get pushed back by the ring anyway. I'm obviously doing this off camera because it is kind of hard to work with. Essentially, I've gotten as much as I can in. The fins kind of get in the way of doing this. So I've got some in. Now I'm going to use my dowel that I've been using before to spread it out. This is exactly the kind of situation where you want the dowel. I'm just kind of brushing it evenly. It's not going to be perfect. If I really couldn't get enough in there, I would put some glue on a piece of paper or something and spread it in that way. Now, this was a tough fit. I test fit these before I glued them to make sure they all fit. There was a little bit of paint residue in a couple of them. So they're in fine now. Spin it around just to spread the glue, and those are the whistles. They are in good shape. Okay. The next thing that we need to do is probably put the decals on. Now, the problem with these Estes kits in general is, here's my decal sheet. It's nice. Oops, I hope I have the right way. It's nice, they're decent. These are actual stickers. So they're self-adhesive. You don't need to do anything special other than remove the back. But the problem is there are 4 stickers that go on these strakes, and 4 that go on the fins. There are 8 faces to each of those. So you get half as many as you need, which essentially means you're going to have a nice face and a not so nice face, which is annoying. But what are you going to do? I'm not going to put all these on camera, but the short version here is here's the launch lug. I'm going to use the launch lug as the bad side, and I'm going to then use this side as the good side. I'm going to put the big Screamin Mimi sticker, here we are, kind of running like this. Again, you can do these, put them however you want, but the instructions and the packaging both show you what they think it ought to look like. I suppose that's upside down again. There we go. So the Screamin Mimi big long decal should go essentially in the middle of the body tube here. So let's get that out. Personally, I find these stickers that are particularly long and self-sticking to be hard to deal with. So I'm peeling it off, but this is so long that it's hard to get lined up properly, and you only have a limited number of tries at it. In fact, you really want to get it right the first time, because every time that you have to pick it up or move it like that, for instance, it removes some of the stickiness, and you don't want that. So essentially, I want it kind of centered in the middle of the white section. That looks pretty good, and I'm focusing on the ends and the middle. Now, once it's in place, I'm going to carefully smooth out any bubbles and get it to lay flat. And there we go. That looks, I've seen worse. It looks pretty good. It's generally like about the same amount of distance between the red and the nose cone, so the nose cone's going to come off. So that looks pretty good. As for the other stickers, so remember we have a good side and a bad side, essentially. So I want the stickers to be showing on the same face as the Screamin Mimi. So I'm going to put them on these faces, this face, and this face. So that's the 4 for the strakes. And then on the fins, well, maybe, I don't know, that one's kind of a harder judgment call. Maybe these 2 and these 2. Really, it's kind of your choice. I'm not going to, again, do all these on camera because, what's the point? You see me do one, you see me do them all. These things are also kind of notorious for being difficult to remove. All right, so here is my first strake sticker. Looking at the decals, it should go like this. It's going to be kind of hard to do with the way things are aligned. So I'm going to rearrange things. And getting the sticker in with all the fins in the way is not going to be super easy either. So I'm going to do my best to line up the fin, the edge first, and then try to make sure that the decal is flush against the white part of the tube. It looks like, there we go. That's, I'm not really pleased with that. It's sticking a little bit over the edge here. Part of the deal is if you shape these fins at all, they're not going to be exactly the length that they were in the wood and that the decals are trimmed for. So we want them to be as close as possible to the edges. We can always, like this I've got hanging over a little bit. I think I'd rather have that. I can always go around and trim that with an X-Acto knife later, and unfortunately I have a little bubble here. There. That looks like it's about as good as it's going to get. Yeah, I definitely need to trim those after I get them all on. Let's do one of the big fins in the back now. Again, part of the challenge here is to make sure that you put it in the right place. So this one should go vaguely like this. And again, I'm going to, according to the decals or the instructions, the box picture, I want it basically flush with the body tube. So that's a little challenging again because we have all these other fins in the way. Yeah. So I'm going to try to get it up against the body tube and hopefully near the edge of the fin. Yeah, and that's not perfect either, but it's good enough. All right, so I will do the rest of those off camera. The other things that need to be done, we need to put in the shock cord. Now, the shock cord that came with this kit is old. This is this is a vintage kit. This is elastic. Elastic and age don't really go together, so I can even tell by pulling on this. This is not as springy as it used to be. So we're not going to use this. This can go in the trash. What we're going to use instead is this stuff. This is, it's basically Kevlar. It is some pretty serious stuff. It's very strong. It's not going anywhere. It is not fireproof, but it is fire resistant, so it can take more of a beating from the ejection charge. I did not build this into the engine mount, but one of the nice things about using this kind of thread instead of an elastic shock cord is that you can build it all the way in down here and run it out through the top. The reason you would want to do that is because the anchoring here, where the motor mount is a lot stronger than using what we're going to do, which is one of these things, which is how we would have mounted the elastic. In any event, we're going to do the same basic approach, which is kind of common to all these Estes kits. Put some glue, a couple, that's clogged, figures. We're going to put a couple stripes of glue in there. Now, this stuff is a little harder to work with because it's so thin. It would be easier to use the elastic, but it's good enough. So fold it over, just like pretty much every other engine mount, or not engine mount, shock cord mount you're going to make. Then some more glue in section 3. I'm going to put a little more in here. There we go. Fold it over again. Push it down. And then hold it, squeeze it as tightly as you can, count to 30. Once that's taken care of, once the glue inside this is essentially set, we don't want it completely dry, but we want it mostly set, just like a normal shock cord. We're going to mount it inside. And we're going to do basically the same thing. The minimum it needs to be is at least, as long as this inside. But I can probably get this, the length of my 2 fingers into the tube because it's a pretty wide tube. All right, now let's put some more glue on the mount. And then this is going to go into the body. I'm going to mount it in line with the launch lug. That's not super critical how you mount it. But anyway, I'm going to put it in about as far as my 2 fingers can reach. And then I'm going to push the shock cord into the wall. I'm going to use 1 finger now. A second finger is just kind of getting in the way. Make sure it's fitting as flushly as possible. And you do want the shock cord you do want the shock cord part sticking up rather than down, so there's nothing to get caught on. Ideally, this is as flush against the interior of the rocket tube, body tube, as possible, so that the ejection charge doesn't get the parachute tangled in anything. That would be annoying and problematic. All right, the other end of this, we are going to tie through the nose cone. By the way, I still need to trim this out, but essentially I'm just going to put this and tie it through. One thing that you do need to be careful about this is that it doesn't grip nicely like the elastic does, or like another kind of twine or string would. So I'm going to tie this a few times, and then I'm going to put just a drop of crazy glue, super glue, CA glue on the knot to just firm things up so it doesn't come undone. Anyway, that can wait. Don't need to do that on camera. The other final thing really we need to do on camera is, here's the parachute. Under normal circumstances, the instructions say that you should take the parachute and you should gather up the shroud lines, and then you should thread them through the little mount there. We're not going to do that either. We are going to use one of these fishing barrel swivels instead. This is another fairly old parachute, so hopefully this thread isn't kind of worn out either. Um, we'll make do. Anyway, I'm going to gather up all the shroud lines. This one is put together kind of strangely. Usually this one goes straight across. Well, that's okay. It doesn't really matter. So we're going to gather them all up. We got a little loop here. I think I probably have done this before on camera, but we're going to take the loop and we are going to put it through the eye. And then, once we've got enough to work with, we are going to take the barrel and we're going to push it up through the eye, or through the loop rather, not the eye, and then pull it tight. So there we go. This part then, the clasp part, we will hook into the nose cone. Now, the last things that I'm going to do are not going to be on camera either, aside from tying things together, hooking them into the nose cone. Once the decals are all in place, I want the decals to be protected, so I'm going to put a clear coat of spray paint over top of all of this. A very light coat. I use high gloss, but you can use whatever, mostly for protection's sake. So, we want to be careful with that. That protects things, it keeps things in place. All right, so that basically does it. The only thing that's special about this that we need to be careful with when we launch this is, aside from the fact that it's a 24 millimeter engine, 24 millimeter Estes kits usually have a larger diameter launch lug, and this one is 3/16, so we need to make sure that we use the 3/16 rod. Otherwise, it should be a good flight. This thing says that it supposedly goes up to 500 feet on a D engine, which I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, there's a lot of drag, I guess, from the whistles, but it seems unlikely. I will let you know. Thanks for watching, and see you for our next build.